Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are bringing back the OpenGL podcast because I feel that we need to discuss VR. About a year ago, I did a quick video on the WVR1 cheap Chinese headset, and I was pretty enamored with it. The 3D effect was pretty bloody cool, but that's pretty much all it was to me. But over the last year, I've been talking with Ragekill, now known as Slayer for who knows
Yo.
why, about VR, and it seems to be more compelling than I originally thought. And today, I am bringing on several other people as well. We've got Kuzco, Nuo, who has been in a couple of podcasts, and Syjack.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
Hello.
Now, they are part of a VR chat group, and they use VR pretty much every day, so they can give a much more nuanced opinion of VR than I can. But before we get to VR as a concept in general, I just want to give a brief history on my experience with VR. As a kid of the 90s, I first encountered VR at a theme park called Astroworld, which no longer exists. And it was this thing where you had to put this big plastic shell on your head, and you had to sit in this little seat kind of thing. I couldn't really enjoy it because I had to take my glasses off, so I couldn't see anything. Another sort of VR-ish kind of thing that existed at the time, which I actually did enjoy, was a game called Afterburn 2, where you had a cockpit and it was kind of VR in a way, even if it was still kind of 2D. I used a Virtual Boy. We rented it, and I thought it was complete crap. Really, outside of those things in the early to mid-90s, I didn't really touch VR until the WVR headset. And to sum up my experience with that, it was cool, but that was about all it was. It's sort of like those gimmicky toys you still see for sale at Walmart and things of that nature that look great in the toy commercial, but you use it for like maybe a week, and then it just sits gathering dust. Right now, I can see that my headset is completely covered in dust, and yeah, it was great while it lasted, but ultimately I found that just having a big-ass monitor was much more enjoyable. So now we're going to start with Slayer. What is your experience and history with VR?
Well, I'd like to clarify that headset you got. It was a cheap headset. I told you about it. It was like a Walmart deal. It came with a Steam gift card. You literally got it for free. It was $20 with a $20 Steam gift card. It didn't come with motion controls, and it's only like 3 DOF, which means you can only turn your head. I think 6 DOF, you can actually move like your head forward and back and stuff. So I mean, for getting a taste of playing like classic Doom in VR and stuff like that, like basic games like using a mouse and keyboard or controller, it was okay with, or watching 3D movies in VR. I picked up the high-end version of it, though it's still a 3 DOF headset. I mean, I went all hacky on it and used a Kinect camera to expand it to 6 DOF and stuff. And I think I used a PlayStation Move controller with a Google VR Daydream controller. Then I picked up another Google Daydream headset, and so I'm using 2 Daydream controllers for movement for now. It's all, just as a cheap DIY thing until I can cough up a scratch and get like a real VR headset and probably do like full body eventually in the future, all that kind of stuff. So I started out VR, initially kind of like with you using like that big screen beta to watch like 3D movies and stuff, and tried a few games in VR, like again classic Doom, which was awesome. And then eventually I dipped my toes into VR chat after I got the whole hacky setup thing going on, and eventually started to explore it, and we'll get into more of that later because that'd be a long explanation of my experience with that.
Slayer, like, what was your 90s experience with VR?
So I definitely remember reading old computer magazines talking about VR. I remember I had a friend who said he either played like Doom or Duke Nukem in VR back in the 90s. but it was like a big old bulky headset and the resolution was low. I did. I do own a Virtual Boy with Mario Tennis, and that was kind of fun. Otherwise, not too much experience. You know, so that's all I got to say on that.
All right.
Watching
Kuzco.
Lawnmower Man.
Well, I guess that works. Kuzco, what is your experience with VR?
So my experience, it kind of really all started when I actually picked it up in August of 2019, just like on a whim, because I actually started playing well, I wouldn't say I started playing it, but like the first like kind of VR compatible game I started playing was VR Chat. But I didn't have a VR at the time until later on because I was kind of just playing with like a laptop, and that was it. Just to play with like a friend of mine. But then he ended up just not really playing with it, so I kind of just like kept going, and it kind of went from there. But sometime late August, I decided to, I was curious about it, so I ended up, I started with the first generation Oculus Rift, and at the time, it was really cheap, it was very good VR to use and everything like that, and so I was like, okay, let's try this out. And I instantly fell in love with the whole experience because, like, as soon as you put on the headset, like, just like initially, you go through like the tutorial thing and you like get a feel for what VR actually is like nowadays. Unfortunately, I didn't play with it how it was back then, but nowadays, like, it's definitely hit higher than it is now, because like you can do anything in it, and you could go to different places around the world without even leaving your the computer chair in your room, and just like it's very immersive in a way, but it's not like fully immersive to the point where like you're fully in depth, but like visually you're there. But for me, like, I started with the Oculus Rift, and I slowly wanted to upgrade my system. So like, I went full in on this, and I bought a brand new PC, and I wanted to upgrade my VR, so I bought a HTC Vive, and from there I went and bought like Vive trackers so I can be in full body, like in VR, so like I can be fully immersed into it, and it was probably the greatest decision I ever made. And then from there, it's just been a continuous upscale from like where I was when I first started to like now.
All right, sounds good. Sidejack, what was your experience with VR, both like in the '90s and today?
Well, like you, I went to Six Flags over Texas here, so not the same as Astroworld. But I'm pretty sure we had the same exact setup way back. You strap yourself into this chair, you put on this huge plastic headset. You had some sort of controls. I don't think they were free floating. I think they were like stuck to the chair. But you could like spin around and look at stuff. And I liked it. It was kind of hokey, and you had to like pay extra money for it. But it was fun, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. This would be neat to have. Then I saw stuff like that Virtual Boy come out, and I never got one, but my friend had one, and I went and tried it out, and I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. And then it's like 40 minutes into playing it, you just start getting a headache, and your eyes start watering, and you're just like, okay, I gotta stop. I gotta take this off. And then you like pull that thing off, and everything's like kind of red still, because that thing was only red, but it was still 3D. It was kind of cool. And then you fast forward to today, and I was kind of like Cusco, where I started playing VR Chat about a year ago, but I didn't have any VR set up yet, and I had an older computer. And the reason I started was watched a couple Twitch streamers who were doing it, and I was trying to teach myself like a foreign language, and they would go on and practice, and they would want to learn English. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to get on there and talk to people, so I can teach them English. They can teach me whatever, and that started. I just started logging in with my computer, doing desktop mode, no VR, talking to them, and I just, always saw their arms moving and hands moving. I'm just like, I know this has VR, and I really want to get it, but my computer's old, and I
Same here.
was, yeah, and I wanted to get it, but I knew I would have to upgrade everything on the computer, and I didn't want to get the first gen system. And so what I did is I waited and waited, and eventually the Valve Index came out, and I watched a whole bunch of reviews, read reviews about it, and everyone was pretty much saying it is a true second gen system. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get a new computer. I'm gonna put it together myself. I'm gonna max it out. I'm gonna buy the Index, and that's what I did. And ever since I did that, it's changed like my perception of, I guess you could say, gaming, but it's not really a game. Like if it's not in VR, I almost just don't want to play it because it's that, to me it's that it changes your perception of what you can do with a computer in your house. Like it's such a different experience than just staring at a screen and moving a mouse around. And I think the connections you can make with people within VR are just that more personable. And like I played WoW, World of Warcraft for a very long time, and I still have friends from that game. But I think the friends that I can make now in any kind of VR world is somehow better because I can get a sense of their body language and all that. But that's pretty much my experience. I got my Valve Index like in September, and so that was 4 months ago. So, and I don't want to go back to not having one.
All right. And now, Nuo, what is your experience with VR?
Well, it started pretty early on. My cousin had a Virtual Boy, and it's pretty reminiscent of Cyjack's experience, where it was cool, but then I had a splitting headache. I quit pretty fast. Other than that, there was an arcade machine that was definitely not virtual reality per se, but it was more 4D gaming, they called it, where the entire carriage that you were in spun and rotated as you rode a roller coaster that was displayed on 3 screens surrounding you. And it was kind of cool, but one of those gimmicks where you had to drop $5 to even sit in the damn thing, so I only did that about twice. And as VR came around, I'd always been aware of it in pop culture and media, from 80s films, 90s films. It was always kind of in the background of quite a few futuristic movies. It initially just seemed like a gimmick. A lot of the experiences that were sold for it were kind of one-off, like ride a roller coaster, have things jump out at you and scream boo and startle you, but do it in the exact same manner every time you run it, so it only has a single time use. So even then, my interest wasn't very strong per se. I just kind of knew it was this thing that had potential to be cool. And flash forward to last year in August, I had a surgery where I was incapacitated for 6 weeks. And I'm watching Twitch streams pretty obsessively because I'm not even allowed to get my blood pressure up, otherwise it'll cause surgical complications. And a streamer I was watching went into VR chat, and it was kind of like what Cyjack said with the hand motion, the head motion, the body language. I suddenly realized something was up, that this was not just a one-time experience or a one-off thing. And so I got into it in desktop mode initially, simply to talk to people. And thanks to Kuzco, I have VR, because he gave me that first generation headset that he mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since then, I haven't looked back. It's kind of like what Cyjack said to a degree, where I don't even want to bother with a flat screen half the time. There's a few games that draw me back in, particularly driving games that can't be run in VR. but otherwise, it actually killed PC gaming for me in its own way.
So, basically, what I'm getting at, or what everyone's getting at, is VR has moved beyond the gimmick. We're no longer just, looking at a roller coaster or looking at just some sort of static environment. It's now fully evolved to its own sort of thing.
Correct.
I would say so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, would it be the combination of the headset and the motion controls and the head tracking, of all those things combined to create this entirely new experience, essentially?
Absolutely. It's a big factor. The ability to crouch down, and this is pretty unique to VR chat, and I know we're not getting too into that yet, but to crouch down and talk to a person who's 4 inches tall, or crane your neck and back up because they're 14 feet tall or 100 feet tall, and crouching down to look at you, everything appears to be in an absolute and real scale. You interact with your environment in a very intuitive fashion where you can I find myself sidestepping when people go to walk past me, even though they can easily walk through me, because the real social mannerisms and kind of expectations naturally facilitate themselves in this environment.
And
It's
it's
like-
sometimes interesting how you're saying you move out of people's way. Sometimes you don't want to run into something, or you find yourself almost leaning against a wall that's not there just
I've done
because.
that.
Yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Like it becomes like a second nature kind of thing. Like after a while, that like you've done it so long, like whenever you're in it, it just becomes like something that is just like completely normal for you. So like you'll literally have those moments where like if you do it too much, like it's funny, I actually did this one time, like back when I like first got VR. I played it a lot to the point where like I needed to give myself a break for a little bit, because like I literally woke up one day and like I don't know why I did this, but like I unintentionally like decided to, like, whenever I got out of my bed, I for some reason thought I had the controller still in my hand, and I was like trying to like turn with like the little analog stick, and I was like trying to turn to see like if I could turn the other way. And I was like, wait a minute, this isn't right. I'm like, oh wait, I'm not in VR anymore. So it's just yeah.
Dude, to add to that, with the Index, the controllers are a little different than some of them. So these controllers, they strap to my hand, and I do gestures by doing different like fingers, like finger guns, 2 fingers, like the rock on symbol or the devil horns, or like open palm. I've noticed that sometimes I'll be like trying not to do a gesture when I'm not even in VR. Like, so I'll have my hands resting in a way that doesn't make a gesture, and I'm just standing there, like in real life, like getting lunch at a restaurant or something. And I'll just be like, wait, I don't have to worry about doing that.
I've
Yeah.
experienced that too. I tend to keep my fingers away from my palms when I'm standing, kind of like I'm getting ready to run. Because I know if I touch the buttons, I'm gonna make a facial expression.
I noticed I point a lot in VR chat, and when I'm taking photos at the camera, I'm like, "Ugh," my fingers. But yeah, if I was gonna like do like the whole concept of like VR and VR chats, this is a big discussion we'll get into. It's like it's like having all your ultimate fantasies and dreams exist in a virtual plane. I mean,
Some
it's
you
something-
don't know about.
It's something you just have to experience. Like, yeah, I mean, but we'll get more into that later. But I'm just saying if that was the best way to like explain VR or try to sell VR to someone, and I'm referring to the games too. I mean, because like that game Boneworks, which I guess we can also get into more in a second. Like, it's like if you like guns, just the amount of stuff you could do with like gun flipping and like throw it. You can throw a clip in the air, have everything go slow mo, grab it, like throw it in your gun.
No,
Nuance more about this
you
game.
would say magazine, correct? Unless you're talking about
yeah, I
M1
meant
Garand.
magazine.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
He did mean magazine.
Yes.
But
Okay, good.
it's that Boneworks is absolutely a game that lets you live out your Matrix fantasies or be John Wick if you so desire.
Now, I guess here's the thing that I think not just me, but many members of the public would have the issue of having to wear that thing on your head is one of the harder parts of it. It's like that's what really kind of turned me off of it is I had to put this thing on my head. I'm completely blind to the world. Like, how do you adjust for that to the point where you can stay in there for a while?
There's not the biggest period of adjustment I discovered was periodically colliding with the physical world, like my walls or my desk. But some of those things, especially with more modern VR, are remedied by what is called a guardian. So if it detects your hands or your head coming within a certain proximity of an outline boundary that you define yourself, these blue grids appear around you that let you know the shape of the area around you. So, like, I've stopped having that problem. And in addition, unless you're absolutely deafening yourself with the VR headset, you can usually still hear. Like, you learn to rely on your ears more. You'll keep your door shut while you're in VR. That way nobody walks up behind you and accidentally gets a backhand.
Yeah, that'd be
My
bad.
my nephews even call me from the door when they see that I'm in VR because we had a near miss once where I scared the living daylights out of one of them because I swung around with a gun in my hands and practically nearly punched a 7-year-old.
That sounds
But
painful.
everybody learns around it, and you get used to it in a weird way. You get used to just having a peripheral amount of hearing that lets you know what's going on in the real world while giving up eyesight. It helps that it doesn't feel like you're giving up eyesight. It feels like you have all of your senses except for touch primarily.
And you do get over the motion sickness aspect too after a while too. At first you're kind of like, ugh, and then
Oh man.
it just wears off.
I never
Yeah.
experienced it.
I'm not someone who gets motion sickness. I've done things to try to get motion sickness. And like, putting on the headset the first time and going into different worlds or games that flip you around when you're standing, it kind of made me dizzy. It doesn't do it anymore. I can't get dizzy in VR anymore. I'm broken now. I can't get any kind of motion sickness.
Well, yeah, it's a term that's been coined in the vernacular, which is VR legs. Think sea legs and you'll get it.
Hmm.
If you spend
Yeah.
long enough in VR and you don't have some, like, horrible tendency to get motion sick, which some people, they will get on a ship and they could be on a months-long voyage and they will be sick every day of that voyage. Those people might, unfortunately, never be able to adapt to VR. But for the vast majority of the general public, it'll be a momentary discomfort and kind of a wiring of new connections as your brain learns not to react to visual changes in its environment.
Right.
Now, see, this seems pretty interesting to me because, over the past decade now, we've seen 3D movies kind of get popular for a little bit, then fall by the wayside. We've seen a lot of advances in motion controls, and it does really seem that VR today is really the culmination of all of that in a package that works. But what I think really is really the thing I think is holding back VR from really getting any more popular than it already has, really is that headset. I think that if you were to somehow make a headset kind of like glasses, so to speak, I think that would actually make a difference. Because I think it's just that sensory deprivation of being locked into that really is kind of off-putting, especially for me. It's just like you're now tied to the computer in a way. Like if you're just sitting at a computer looking at a screen, you can still see the whole room. You can still get up fairly easily. Whereas with that headset, you are the computer, man.
Well, there's definitely a procedure for disentanglement that you learn pretty rapidly. I can get off my headset, and because my controllers are strapped to my wrists, if I really needed to, I guess I have 2 built-in melee weapons. Like, I don't really need to get rid of them to do anything. I've walked to the kitchen with my hands still on simply because it was a little less inconvenient to leave them on. It doesn't. You first of all, you kind of it falls under the you get used to it category, but also with advances with like the Index and the latest Vive developments, they have cameras in them that you can actually use a button to see the exterior world, and just at a glance look at something and be looking right at it, if in monocular vision.
So, the games. Now, all I played was just Doom in 3D. I played one Descent clone or Descent Rebirth kind of thing in 3D, and I found it to be okay. But what makes, like, when you play it with a real headset, what makes playing, say, Payday 2, which I played a decent amount of, what makes VR Payday 2 better than just regular Payday 2?
I think Cusco should start with this because you played it on 2D on the console and you were like it's fun, it's all right. And then when you played it in VR, you were like, holy shit.
Yeah. So for me, like, I played Payday 2 like on the Xbox just normally before even all this. And I mean, it plays like just like a regular strategy game. You play with your friends or whatever like that. You act out the heist, you steal the money, you do the hostages, whatever like that, whatever. It wasn't that immersive in a way. But whenever I got to actually play it in VR, like it was like a whole nother level. Because like you are the person in the game like robbing people. Like you're doing this thing like with like in a real life situation, but you're not actually there. Because like whenever you're in VR, you're completely immersed to the point where like you hold up the gun like how you're supposed to hold the gun. You do the whole movements and everything with your hands, like tell people to get down, everything like that. But whenever people are shooting at you, you're in it. Like people are shooting at you, you're turning around, you're getting into different position like in real life because you're going prone, you're going crouched, like everything. You're like tilting back and forth, you're going all these different directions. And like for me, whenever I first played it, I literally was sweating afterwards because like I was like freaking out on how crazy like in depth it was. And after it was funny, like after I stopped playing, I looked at my cord and it was the most tangled it's ever been, like since I like ever got VR. Like it was a complete mess. But I would definitely say like comparing those two, like the VR version was completely more immersive than the console version.
Now, is that immersion what makes the game better, essentially?
Yes and no, because like I mean you got to think about like I mean it's a fun game. Like don't get me wrong, like even without the VR, but like the VR compatibility of it just made it like a little bit better in a way.
So one cool aspect of Payday 2 in VR that you don't get in 2D mode or whatever, desktop, whatever you want to call it, since you have the VR controls, you can actually pick locks or open safes and fire for gun at the same time, as well as you can heal people. And again, you use your other hand to fire. You can't do that in the regular version, so you get so much more immersion.
Can you blind fire also?
Yes, you can.
Mm-hmm.
You can basically do anything that you saw in the movie Heat to a degree.
Pretty much.
And that's a big part of it is like in Payday 2 on desktop mode, you can put the bag on your belly, that little belly pouch thing where you can carry all your stuff, and you've stowed away the bag, it's on your back. And that's it, and you can use your gun at the same time. I've to expedite finishing a mission when I was playing with the bots, you can actually put one bag on your belly, one bag in your hand, and your gun in your other hand, and toss that bag to the ground every time you need to reload and pick it back up. And it's that real physical action that really adds to the experience. Like, you get a sense that you can do what you can do as opposed to it being limited by the DPI of your mouse or whether or not you're getting carpal tunnel soon.
explain how to use how items, like how accessing the items in VR is a lot different than desktop as well.
Well, yeah, in desktop mode, primarily you access items through the mouse wheel or the number keys, correct? It's been a little bit since I've played.
Yeah.
But in VR, you simply look down, and as you look down, a menu appears in front of you that you simply move your hands into to interact. So to say to change from your sidearm to your rifle or back and forth, you simply put your rifle into the sidearm slot and grip on the controller, and it'll immediately swap for your pistol. So you can just, once you know exactly where it is, having played as much as I have, you don't even need to look down. You can just reach down to where your pistol is and draw your pistol. And it's kind of this intuitive action where you can be crouching down and blind firing, run out of ammo, realize you don't have time to change ammo, drop the ammo bag on the floor because, not the ammo bag, the loot bag on the floor because your loot slot on your back is already full, reach down with one hand, reload, and do everything very physically intuitively. As kind of a middle ground between a VR and the desktop experience, for quite some time I played a lot of shooters with the Steam controller exclusively, particularly the gyroscopic controls, which for those that are not in the know, that means rotating the controller acts as a mouse. And it was the repetitive nature of those actions, the ability to snap and fire exactly where I mean to, because to move my aim this far is to move my hands exactly that far. That made it so much more intuitive, and I would say deeply adds to the immersion. And the question we asked earlier, were asked earlier, is did it make it better? It definitely falls into the yes and no territory because I didn't used to have to take breaks from the desktop mode because I was sweating. I would like a full-on adrenaline rush by the time I kill 300 cops in VR, where in desktop mode it's just kind of pointing and clicking like you're highlighting parts of a spreadsheet.
And if you're someone who enjoys firing guns in real life or light gun shooters or whatever, I mean, you definitely get that experience in VR too. That, you know, which is awesome.
Mhm.
I would not put Payday. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lotz.
No, finish.
I would not put Payday at the pinnacle of gun handling. It's definitely in the simplified arcade form, where you press a button to reload and you put your gun down by your abdomen to put the other magazine in. Usually, you can reach into the ammo bag and pull out a magazine and put it in, but
Right.
it snaps in a way that's way too forgiving for like how close your hand is to the rifle. Where in other more recent VR experiences, it comes down to actually lining up the magazine with the pistol and sliding it in and grabbing the slide and pulling it back enough, because if you don't pull it back enough, it won't chamber around.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing all of these things under the stress of being in a 3D immersive environment where it does feel like you're in a certain amount of danger.
And that's even with like a rifle too in the game as well. Like I've noticed that too. It's like not just the pistol.
Well, yeah, all of Payday 2 is definitely a simplified version of gun mechanics.
Yeah.
So that is pretty compelling all around. I mean, that does actually make gaming that much better. I think if there was better implementation in something like, say, Skyrim, you could really start losing yourself in that experience.
There is a VR version of Skyrim, and I believe Noah also owns that.
Oh, how
yeah,
is that?
I've played. I'll pull up the stat while I'm talking. I've played it quite a bit, is what I'll say. Not knowing how many hours, I'm actually genuinely curious because God help my soul, how much time have I spent in Skyrim?
Well, while you're looking that up, I also want to bring
48 hours in Skyrim VR. That's kind of shocking to me, honestly.
I also want to bring up real quick, Serious Sam in VR is also cool. And the neat thing they add out that game is you can actually dual wield like any weapon you want. And of course, the game has to be ridiculous. So if you want 2 frickin' rocket launchers, you can run around, crank up that difficulty, and go insane. And you know, and But anyways, back to Skyrim VR.
Well,
What's
Skyrim
the
VR
immersion like?
it's weird. It's pretty, and you can get pretty into it. Like if you play Archer, the bow and arrow simulation's pretty good, and if you focus on upgrading your abilities where the bows are really deadly, sticking an arrow in someone's head, even though the game lacks locational damage, which I'll never forgive, does become moderately satisfying when you can actually be like Legolas and drop 4 arrows into a bandit's chest before they take 3 steps. And then you run forward to them, retrieve your arrows. It's pretty, but it's not immersive in the same fashion. You don't really get a sense of danger. You know that you're pretty damn invulnerable and highly unlikely to die.
What
And it
about
goes-
VR mods?
Well, there's a lot of mods you can install. None of them will perfect the experience, but they can improve it. And most of the mods that are compatible with Skyrim's Complete Edition or Collector Edition or whatever the hell they called the updated version that came with all the DLC are usually compatible with VR unless they otherwise specify. So you have a wide array of tools to customize your experience. The modding is really probably the most compelling aspect, but even then I played it for as long as I did, and then I suddenly stopped, just like I did with desktop mode. Like, I wasn't actually very compelled, I was just kind of exploring, and it was cool to go up a mountain and look down the depths, or be in a cave, and I guess that's the big difference between Skyrim Desktop and Skyrim VR, is you can look around you and you are in that environment, and it really does kind of highlight the artistry that goes into video games that looking at them flat does no justice to. You can really find yourself just appreciating the detail of a tomb and going nowhere because you're examining all of the details. And yes, there's some repetitive elements, but for the most part, each room is unique enough that just looking around you can waste a lot of time in a way you never really would in desktop mode.
Now that is kind of interesting, and yet I can see one problem with this, though. The concept of casual gaming. Because if you're really just that immersed, that means you're focusing on that one thing. Like, if you just want to pop into Skyrim, cut up a few bandits or something, you can't really do that in VR. You know, you have to set up the whole thing, get the controllers and all the rest.
It's definitely, there is no real setup. I click Steam VR, I put on the I strap on my hands first, I've learned, before putting on the headset. I throw on the headset, I click the game, and I'm in the game. If I were, it really depends on your playstyle, because I can boot up Pavlov VR and do 1 or 2 rounds of team deathmatch and snap right back out in less than 30 minutes. Like, you can get your fill in certain video game experiences. Onward's a great example, being a tactical shooter, and kind of for point of contrast, if Payday and Skyrim are kind of the ultimate power fantasy, games like Onward are on the far end, where you're like the main character in the film behind enemy lines, and you're at the behest of a vastly superior enemy that outnumbers you and can kill you in a single bullet. So you can have your kind of Kafka-esque nightmare, or you can have your power fantasy, if you will. And either way, it could be an experience that runs as long as you want it to, or as short as you want it to, as long as you're not... I don't know, I guess the only counter example to that would be Boneworks. Is definitely not a casual game. It has a 0 saving system, and levels often take over an hour to beat. And if you quit, you just get to restart the level.
Well, then there's definitely more to VR than I thought there was.
I was going to ask, what is Boneworks and Pavlov like in VR?
Pavlov is to Onward, though you haven't played that either. Think Onward being a military simulator. Pavlov is like Counter-Strike Source. It's on the more casual end of shooters, but it's definitely not easier for the completely faint of heart. It can get really tense. It has a wide variety of game modes, my favorite being Trouble in Terrorist Town, where you have 12 people in the server, and 3 of them at random are chosen to be terrorists, which means their goal is to kill everyone. The rest will be civilians, and 1 will be the detective. And the goal of the 3 terrorists is to deceive everybody else and conspire to kill everybody else. And it can be a very tense and intimidating situation as you're staring down the barrel of a gun knowing full well that you're innocent, and the detective has you having your hands in the air and doing it because you're a good guy when the guy next to you pulls out a 357 and blows off the detective's head, and you just get to roll with it. Like, it creates these dynamic social situations that are unlike any other game I've played VR-wise. But Boneworks is more, I would compare it to Half-Life. Half-Life 2 at the time it came out, when it was a technical marvel. You're just kind of in it to marvel at the physics and all of the things you can do, whether it's fighting with physical enemies that, for instance, you can grapple with, grab them, and knock them off their feet, and then draw your pistol and shoot them in the head. You can pick up a trash can and put it over their head, and it will restrain their arms, and you can shove them around like a bully in high school. You can do basically anything your mind can entail, short of kicking them, unfortunately, because it doesn't have full body tracking. But there's just so much you can do, and it kind of speaks to the fact, because, like, you said there wasn't a lot of casual in your sense, Lotz. There's a wide array of experiences now for VR that, like, at the time when I was first considering VR, weren't even on the horizon.
It honestly sounds like we're getting close to the holodeck in some respects.
It very much is. It's the holodeck minus integration into the real physical world. You are in the holodeck. If we had haptic feedback on our hands and our body, it would basically be the holodeck. And that's what a lot of people don't seem to get. Like, I presented it to my mother, and she tried out VR, and she tried Google Earth VR, and she just spent a long time flying around the Earth and looking at different locations, and she found that to be utterly fascinating. I stuck her in a Google program called, the name is slipping my mind, one moment, Tilt Brush. And she spent like 45 minutes painting a cabin. And it's a 3-dimensional cabin that she created in space by moving her hands through space, and she could walk around it and look at it. Like, there's a wide array of experiences that aren't just for the niche gamer anymore. And
that's where I want to segue into VR chat, because so far I can get what I get the feeling that people are going to kind of get the wrong idea about VR. They're going to think about a bunch of shut-ins who just live in some sort of virtual world and completely separate themselves from everyone else. What is VR chat?
It is, if anybody remembers AOL chat rooms and all of the chaos of AOL chat rooms from the internet,
Gosh.
it's AOL chat
Or Yahoo
rooms
chat,
in
yeah.
a 3-dimensional and navigatable form, where you can walk around rooms filled with all of the people the internet has to offer, for better or worse, and find communities that can either be close-knit or loosely affiliated, or not at all, and have a diverse array of social experiences, or antisocial, depending on yours and their preferences. And I would call it the opposite of asocial. In a weird way, it's gotten me mostly out of shooters, because there's nothing as collaborative as a conversation. Especially when you can see each other's body language, you can use your hands to gesticulate what you're talking about. It's like the Star Wars hologram, except someone can be a 4-foot-tall dog, or a 97-foot-tall anime girl, or a cat the size of a lima bean, and everybody is socially equal in that world.
Also, many people get phantom touch, so a lot of ways when you are talking with someone or you get a hug or something, your brain will like try to interpret that feeling And if you're not everyone has it, but if you have like Phantom Touch, the whole VR aspect just changes everything. Like I get it primarily like on my face in like chest and stuff, like the front where I can visualize with my eyeballs. It's surreal. I think I've even got like someone breathed in their microphone one time. And I swear I could feel it. It was weird, but cool at the same time. Yeah, a lot of things that Nuo said is pretty accurate to what VR chat is.
Well, I think another part of VR chat, though, like Nuo was saying earlier about the other games, how when you're in 3D, you can appreciate like what the designers are doing. Well, VR chat is largely created by the people in VR chat. It's created by the users, and people will upload worlds, they'll upload avatars. People will have their own avatar that only they have. It's a hugely creator-driven platform where you'll see something you've never seen before, and you might never see it again, but you'll never have seen something ever until you've seen it in like VR chat once.
Yeah.
Right.
So here's the interesting thing about VR chat. We've already talked about this a couple days ago, but VR chat seems to be the logical evolution of the old chat rooms, followed by something like say Skype and then Discord, and then all these other ways of communicating with people. But this is the closest thing you can get, I suppose, because once again, I never use it, to being able to be in a conversation with someone in person, almost halfway around the world.
It's really difficult to explain it because I know you guys use the AOL thing, but when a lot of people are going to listen to this, they're going to be like, AOL, all the toxicness and grossness of chat rooms. And don't get me wrong, there are some people who are trolls and stuff in VR chat, though VR chat does have an amazing block feature to where if someone's annoying you, they're gone. But the best way I can explain VR chat is just like once you find the right just people to hang with, it's like you get to experience the best humanity has to offer. I know that's a really deep thing to say, but it's true. First of all, there's not really a whole lot of discussions on like politics and all that stuff. And when there is, it's usually civil.
Oh yeah, I'm actually going to comment on that in a moment.
There's, I don't know. There's like a great understanding. I've seen so many amazing things that people share stories about their lives and stuff. I've just met so many people I have stuff in common with. It's if you're someone who has like any type of maybe social problem or whatever, give VR chat a try. I think in a lot of ways this is actually improving humanity as a whole, and I know that may sound kind of silly in a way, but I really believe that's true. And earlier, Lotz was saying like how VR makes you shut in stuff. Well, I was initially worried about that when I got into VR chat. I was like, oh shit, this is just gonna make me stay indoors a lot. But like, I met some friends that were close by, and they had a house party, and I went to it and met them. It was amazing. And at first, I was kind of worried. I'm like, because I don't really. And then I thought, wait a second, I do know these people. I've known them for months. And it's because when you meet someone in a video game, you do have to take longer to getting to know that person's clicks and how you trust them and stuff. But VR really helps remove that layer, and you can read people better. You can read someone if they're kind of creepy or engage them if they're normal or not. It's surreal. And like, man, I mean, like the amount of experience I've had in VR chat, and VR chat is not just chat. That really needs to be stated. Like, there are so many different worlds, things you can do. You can play games in it. You can explore all kinds of amazing places, and the people you meet. I've met some of the most creative, amazing, nice people. I mean, hell, the other day I was, or even today, actually too, I was rocking out to metal music with some people. It was completely silly. They all had full body and stuff, but it was amazing. It's just like. Just experience that you don't really get anywhere else, and And you know, in a couple of months, I'm doing another meetup with people in VR chat that I'm going to meet in real life. So, and there's other aspects I'll get into a little later on how much it's like changed and improved my life and the way I see and think of things. I don't know. Anyways, I'll let other people talk.
On the subject of what he said, though, one thing I did experience as a positive side effect of VR chat, because maybe my chat room comparison was a little reductive. I've always been a very stoic speaker. I would speak with my hands at my side, often my thumbs in my pockets, you know, kind of very static and using my voice primarily to express all of my ideas. But after getting into VR chat, I've experienced an explosion of body language where in or out of chat, I continually use my hands to convey my ideas. Like I'd almost call it like an Italian trait. You end up talking with your hands and expressing with your hands as much as you're using your voice. And you can get into very impassioned discussion where you can measure how excited is probably the wrong word, but invested a person is by how hard they're trying to just use every tool at their disposal to convey either their passion about a certain position or their beliefs or simply what they thought was really cool that happened. This bus was going this fast and you can't see it, but I've already moved my hands to the right as one would in real life in a conversation when being expressive. And there's this amount of, the way I thought of it is it's expression divorced from physical intimidation. Like you can express an idea, and if somebody turns out to be a real asshole or goes out of the way to ruin your day, as was mentioned by Slaya, you simply block them and you disappear to them and they disappear to you. And you can just cut off that social contact, nip it in the bud right at the beginning, where you don't have to invest in arguing with someone just to keep enjoying the space that you're in. If you don't like the kind of people that hang around a certain world, you create a new instance of the world, which, if you would think about it, is almost a parallel universe in which that world is the same, but the people that occupy it are different, and make it so that only your friends and friends of your friends can join, or only people that you invite can join. And you can create these like truly walled off communities, and that might sound like a negative, but for some levels of conversation it can be a positive, where you don't want everybody intruding simply because somebody's having an emotional moment. I've seen quite a few times in VR chat, maybe been the center of spectacle a few times myself.
So
but
I think... Oh, go on.
Yes, it definitely, it's like a social support system. It can, when I said for better or worse, I really meant it. It really depends on who you end up surrounding yourself with.
So I think when it comes to this VR chat thing, it's like real life, but there's actually a little bit more distance, which I think is very compelling. I've never been one to be particularly sociable in real life. That might seem rather ironic, seeing as how I like making videos in front of, like thousands of people, but, well, that's irony for you. But with VR chat, it sounds a lot like where if you do have some of that social anxiety, you can get around that by having more distance between you and the other person, but instead of just talking to them via voice or text or something, you can actually see them and get to know them better much faster that way, which I think may come to change society as a whole as time goes on. And I would actually have to say possibly for the better. There's no way to know now, but when you think about it, there are a great many people who are outcast in many respects from everyday society, and this might actually help them bridge the gap to get out of that.
Well, I agree, and the other thing it tends to do is it tends to kind of crush preconceptions and stigma. You can go into a public world and you ask, what time is it, and literally receive an answer from every time zone if the world is full enough.
Oh, yeah.
You can encounter people, some people we hang out with are from Germany. Another one is from, I'm forgetting the name of his country and I feel like an asshole, but it's a part of Asia where, Malaysia. He's talking to us from Malaysia. and another person is from Germany in the same room. Another person is in the UK, and one's in
Australia.
Canada. Another's in Australia, and we're
I
all engaged in a conversation together, and that tends to kind of crush preconceptions of nationalism. You do kind of gain a common empathy for people, regardless of where they're from.
Because you're kind of, I mean, like whenever you're on, or like whenever you're in VR chat, like you're kind of like an equal playing field. Like we're all in there basically like wanting to do the same thing, which is basically just like meet new people, get to know them, and also like just play some random games with them. It's not a matter of like really like who's better than the other person, or like there's no judgmental things going on in VR. Whenever you play it, it's mainly like everyone's like on an equal playing field, and everyone's there for the same reason. So
It kind of,
yeah.
sorry, it kind of reminds me of family board games in a way, in a weird
Yeah.
way. Like it's divorced from competitiveness. It's divorced from status. You're simply playing a game like kids used to play cops and robbers. And there's something compelling about that, because it's connection for the sake of connection rather than connection for the sake of attempted domination.
and the connection you make are surreal. I have 2 friends that share the same birthday as me, which is just okay. And they're both super talented, cool people. But if you do go into VR chat, definitely try to go in without any stigmas or stereotypes or anything like that, and just talk and meet random cool people. Especially people who have cool avatars. Compliment on them and see where things go. I mean, we could briefly cover the whole like Shiba Squad thing. A lot of outsiders will look at that and be like, "That's freaking weird." People is cartoon dogs. Oh, it must be a furry thing. Which there's nothing wrong with either one of those. But like, and I mean, it's just people who think it's cool. This community that's been developed, and people get creative and they do like all kinds of like sub creations based off Sheep, which is basically like the Doge meme on the next level, but it's become like a just social group, and not everyone involved in it is a furry, some are, but also you really shouldn't care. You should just go into VR chat wanting to meet new and unique people, and try not to have a bunch of judgmental stereotype stigmas, and you'll really learn to just kind of connect with humanity on a new level.
I would say also, like, if you do go into VR chat and you have questions or you have issues or you need help, ask. Some of the nicest people I've ever met are in VR chat, and it could just be some random person in a random world or group of people, and they'll just take you aside and say like, okay, now click this, okay, now do this, and there you go. And that has been very consistent no matter which group I've been in VR chat. And it's kind of different from, like, I don't know, reality, where you walk into like a mechanic shop, it's like, how do I do this? And they're like, oh no, I'm charging you for that. That's money. I'm not gonna tell you how to do this.
And there are other groups. The Shiba community group thing was one thing I listed, but there's like a bunch of others.
If you're into anime, there's anime groups. If you're into sports, there's definitely like sports groups. If you're into like memes, you just want meme generation. There's tons of that. So
Right.
There's so much it's cancerous, but it's
So
it's
like the
okay.
Shivas are just what kind of percolated to the surface at this point.
Well, they're not even the surface, honestly. They got an individual named Pikapidi created the Shiba avatar, and he even has admitted himself it was, how do I make money off of a skill? And so he created a Patreon where people could pay him, and he would create each of them a custom dog character based on the same model. Before he knew it, he had hundreds of characters to make, and he was overwhelmed. And eventually, over time, videos started getting produced that got very popular on YouTube, namely the Shiba King series. And they all portray the Shiba squad, as they call themselves, in a certain way as like this partying group that's like, drinking in college on steroids with people from all over the world. And it's not the only facet, but it drew a lot of interest to this one group. But beyond the Shibas, there's an entire group on Discord of hyenas. There's another one that are these little anime rabbit things that I've already forgotten the name of again, but somebody
Hopkins.
here. Hobkins. And Hobkins are tremendously huge. They're people who make an entire world where they've simply ripped video game characters, and you can search Nintendo in the world and find a world where you can be practically any Nintendo character you want. You can be Master Chief. You can
Master
be
Chief is not Nintendo. Shigeru Miyamoto did not create Master Chief.
But yeah,
I mean,
it's only the surface. I would say that Shiba Squad is like a sub-community that the four of us happen to be a part of, but we're just one small subset of a tremendous number of users that are using VR chat all for their own purposes.
And honestly, it was just because we thought it was neat. There was a lot of creativity to it. Like I said, if you go into VR chat, don't be afraid to approach these groups. They're all unique and very creative. Again, don't be like, oh, well, this group is da-da-da-da-da. Just communicate with people, just talk with them, and you just be surprised. I mean, like Lotz, you're into retro stuff. I met 3 people who collect retro games, and like all kinds of like cool retro stuff. There's this one person where he has like, he's also the Shiba thing, and he has like his kind of retro-esque. He has like a Sega Genesis controller on his for his tag, and if you actually look in his chest, he put a Zelda heart in there. It's just really cool, creative stuff. Another thing I need to point out though is if you're looking up VR chat on YouTube, I don't think YouTube is very kind to reflecting on all the aspects of VR chat. They do focus a lot of the meme kind of culture and stuff.
It actually doesn't do it justice.
No, it doesn't.
Like you have to experience it for your own.
It's the big factor is I call it the asshole factor. The ones who are recording themselves doing things and recording other people for the most part are not the ones having notable and meaningful social experiences. They're the same kind of people who try and like goad somebody into jumping off a roof at a party so they can film it and get lots of hits on Twitter. Like, they don't necessarily reflect the sense of community that can exist, which are often moments that almost nobody would think of filming.
So, like the firearms community, the media is just sort of demonizing them for the acts of a few.
Yes.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
No one can be explained what VR chat is. They have to see it for themselves, or whatever.
So,
taking that Matrix line and twisting it.
With all that in mind...
Wait, pause for 1 second. There is some good YouTube videos. Like, I saw, there's one YouTube video where someone was saying, like, how VR chat saved him from suicide in his life and depression and stuff. And that, his name is Gearberg. You can look up his video on YouTube. There was another person I met, too, who's going through a rough time. And, anyways, go on, Lotz. Sorry about that.
Well, actually, I'm about to be horribly negative.
Go on.
Okay, so this is something that popped into my head today while thinking about things to talk about in this particular video, and it's something that it's negative, but I want to bring it up because it's something that has happened throughout the years in every form of communication since the internet started. Right now, this is just a theory of mine. People in VR chat, people who use VR, are self-selecting. There's a large barrier of entry in terms of skill and money to get into VR. It's not common. And so the people in VR chat are nice because they're the kinds of people who are predispositioned to be this way. Once it becomes more common, like once there's the cheap VR... Actually, no. Once there's the easy VR setup, sort of like the smartphone, will the community change, and will it change for the worse? Because we saw in the early days of the internet. Now, this is only secondhand knowledge because I wasn't, well, I was still a kid at the time. At the early days of the internet, everybody was great, and then all the normal people showed up, all the normies, you know, and it became cancerous and filled with assholes and things of that nature. Could that happen to VR once that barrier to entry is no longer there?
It's already happening to an extent, but to certain degrees, the abilities of communities to self-segregate, like into private worlds, into friends-only worlds. Like, for instance, when me and my friends primarily get on, the world that we're in is usually a friends plus world, which means, as I mentioned earlier, only my friends can join, and only the friends of each person there can join. And there's a certain amount of stigma when an asshole shows up, where a few people will take it upon themselves to find out, okay, whose friend is this guy?
Mm-hmm.
And then you go up to them later on and you're like, dude, your friend's kind of a dick. And there's a certain amount of real world social pressure that takes it beyond like the internet board, where, yeah, you're just, some people will always troll. Some people have avatars exclusively designed for the purpose of crashing your computer and closing the game on you.
Mm-hmm.
Those people will probably not change until they change in an emotional and developmental manner. And those people, when you see them, when you recognize them, you tend to develop a pretty good eye. You're like, okay, my computer's performing a lot worse all of a sudden. Who's new? Or somebody comes in and their character starts spawning out 1,000 particles plus. You get really quick at just kind of blocking their avatar where they look like a robot. And you can walk up to them and be like, hey, dude, you're kind of being an asshole. And if they respond hostily, you can turn off their voice and inform them that you've turned off their ability to speak to you.
Now that, I think, is kind of an interesting... Oh, no, go on.
It's got like some kind of terrifying dystopian elements to it, to a degree. Like in line with the social credit system, but for the most part, it's definitely a positive compared to the general experience, say like in most of PC or Xbox gaming or PS3 gaming, whatever. I said PS3, I'm old.
I would like to add that out of all the experiences I've had in VR chat, there's really only been 2 bad apples that have made a bad name for themselves, and most people block anyways, so that's a pretty small number compared to other platforms and games and social experiences.
But there's a good chance it'll change once it becomes easier, because I think, you know, if we, like the PS3 and Xbox, you know, that was a big...
You'll find a group of people and you'll eventually filter out those kind of toxicities anyways. It's just, you know, life finds a way.
Yeah, but like...
Well, I get what Lotz is saying. And like we are, because of the Oculus Quest, because 10,000 little shits asked their parents for an Oculus Quest who had no idea what they were letting their children engage with.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, now that's interesting.
There's an immense influx of teens and tweens.
Yeah,
and
I wonder if
sometimes
there's
just
gonna
outright kids. And it can feel like a borderline gray area legal situation.
Yeah, will there be regulations for that? Because the more that kids get involved in this, what's going to happen with that? And I think there might be some free speech concerns in that regard as well.
Well, unfortunately, given who VR Chat is owned by, and fortunately, the way it's probably going is towards segregation as opposed to, elimination or censorship. Eventually, there may be a VR Chat Kids app where when you put in your registered age on a device, it does not allow you to enter the VR chat where you can encounter a drunk adult talking about their suicidal ideation, or a nihilist, or an utterly inappropriate and lewd individual who's going to have conversations with your kids that will turn your hair white if you ever heard them.
I mean, it's literally like, it's like those bad stories where, you know, you hear about these like little kids who are like way younger than you, and like they ask their parents if like they can buy GTA for like the first time, but then like they like never really like seen or heard anything about it, or they've heard a little bit about it, but like they just don't know the full potential about it, and then they just get thrown into this hot mess where it's just like, oh wait, this is not cool for them.
Well, it's got an entire layer that almost to that degree, and we are definitely getting to the negative side of this.
Yeah.
Odds are their parents will never ever put on their headset and experience the environment that their kid is in, and because it's in a self-contained headset, they can't see what their kid sees.
They can only hear like what the kid's saying
in response.
Yeah.
And like it's a tremendous factor where like parents they have a responsibility to educate themselves if they want to be any kind of proactive parent, to understand what the full breadth of an infinite online community means.
And I don't think they're going to care, because we've already seen the complete lack of parenting in many respects. But one positive about kids getting involved in this is, depending on what world they end up in, they could actually be helped in many respects by the people in VR chat, the good ones at least. And I think there might actually be an interesting thing on that as well.
Well, I'm inclined to agree. I've had personal experience with that in regards to, like, I would say teenagers. I don't think I've really given this talk to anything that would be called a tween, but people under the age of 18 who are like, I think I'm gay and my life's a living hell. And you can actually be there to be supportive and be not like in that fake way, like, oh, think your way through the problem. Where you can just kind of give them the real talk that some people in life are objectively shitty based on their beliefs. And that if this is who they are, to an extent, this is something that they're going to have to deal with while they maintain the social and familial connections that they are stuck with at their age. But that life will change for the better if they give it time and effort.
That's compelling for other reasons in addition to that. You know, you could it doesn't just have to be teens, it can be people who are older, you know, things of that nature. But it also can be other issues as well that are seen as a stigma. You know, it actually seems quite interesting in that regard, depending upon the people you're with. But since it is a self-segregating community, you might be able to avoid that. What's kind of interesting now that I think of it is this could be sort of like, for want of a better website, a super Reddit, so to speak. Because Reddit, while it's definitely gotten more cancerous in the last, 5 years, there are still decent Reddits on there that aren't filled with complete crap. And I think the quasi-human interaction that you get with VR might actually end up helping a lot of people in the long run, because it's one thing to read something on a computer screen, it's another thing to actually talk to someone who is sort of there.
And also, to expand on that, if you break down crying, to have people actually kneeling down and to comfort you and talk you through it.
Yeah, I don't want to give any specifics for anyone, but in a way, I think everyone here, VR Chat's helped one way or another, one situation of something, and the people we've known too. It's, you know.
Yes, like I can honestly give one good example. So in VR chat, you know, you meet a wide variety of people. A lot of people are going through a lot of realistic relationship kind of things going on with them, and they need someone to talk to. And it's funny because the way that I feel that VR chat has kind of helped me and also others that I've met since playing it, it's kind of grown to this giant therapy session in a way where it's been to the point where it's something that you can literally get into a group of people and talk about the same things that you're going through and just similarities that's going on in your lives, and then you can just be one-on-one with them, and you can relate to them, and you can be there, not physically, but you can literally walk up to them in game, and you can give them advice, comfort them, because I actually knew someone a couple weeks ago who was actually going through some stuff, and I tried to give him good advice, help helped him out because he had some stuff going on, and it actually helped him, and he's been way better since then.
Hmm. It's also a unique source of feedback. It's a bit of a story time moment, but the reason I got into VR chat, as I mentioned, that surgery, I saw it on Twitch, and I was like, okay, there's something I could be doing. Like, no heart rate raising, no, any of the stuff that's going to risk my surgical recovery, which, by the way, was to fix a broken nose. And I really didn't want my nose to collapse. That's kind of a terrifying concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so I start getting into VR chat. At the same time, I'm in a bad relationship that I didn't even know it was a bad relationship because I hadn't been in many relationships in my life. And this person I was with had told me not to talk to other people about this relationship, which is a pretty big red flag that I had missed, admittedly. But it wasn't until I was in VR chat that I started kind of opening up about what I was going through. And when 30 out of 30 people go, dude, that's not right, it can kind of reframe things in a way that can broaden your perspective to a point where you can see things for what they are. And I do credit the friends I've made in VR chat for getting me out of what probably would have been an abusive relationship had I ever moved to where they were. And it's not without without that input, I would probably be friendless in an apartment and very clinically depressed because of the nature of that relationship. And that person, it was funny because VR chat was such a threat to them when they found out that I was in this online community where I could talk to anyone about anything. And they tried to join in on their laptop, but their laptop couldn't run it. And so they got a brief glimpse of me talking to a bunch of other people, and then their computer crashed. And they started ranting and raving about how much time I was spending on VR chat. Well, I'm sorry, I'm literally on bed rest. I'm not even allowed to vacuum the floor or sweep the house. I'm supposed to be lying down pretty much all the time for 6 weeks. And it gave me access to people with common experiences and in many ways more experience than I had. And it helped me kind of, without sounding too cliche, see the light in regards to just what was going on in my life, what was the road I was on, and where would it, which were things I had been ignoring because I guess they'd been unpleasant to think about. And let's just say my romantic partner happened to be a master of gaslighting, so I happened to think that a lot of my anxieties were simply anxiety, like with a capital A, medical diagnosis, not rationally based anxieties based on evidence that was directly in front of my face.
So basically, it's a lot more than just a bunch of Shibas sitting around talking about being a furry.
Absolutely. There's quite a few. I would say that the Shiba Squad attracts a certain number of furries because it's access to an animal-shaped avatar that not only looks good, but is extraordinarily well animated for puppetry. The mouth moves and you can make, I think it's 27 different sounds that the mouth animates.
Mm-hmm. It's around that.
Every finger position creates a different facial expression, and using both hands, you can create combinations of facial expressions that allow you to express, I would say, a total of probably 16 total emotions, and then in between thereof. And so it's a natural attractor for them, but there's all of these people outside of the furry fandom who look at it, and this was kind of Pikapedi's point when he talked about it in the video he made, where they were just attracted. He wanted to make something so well animated that when you put it on and looked in the mirror, everything else would look like shit. And there's a lot of people who simply tried one on and stayed because it was the most expressive they had ever been.
So the Shiba is not meant for just furries. It's meant for...
No, it's not.
It's more of a software... It's software that allows you to be more expressive through the VR medium.
Yeah. Like if you think about anime, for instance, most anime 4 or 5 slides for the eyes that swap out, whether you're blinking, eye open, angry, sad, etc. You can have a laughy face, you can have a blushy face. That's about it in the anime range of emotion. And they'll have those expressions on their hands. But to be able to squint your eyes while you point and decide whether or not you're snarling, whether or not your ears are back, whether or not your eyes are simultaneously wide as your brows are furrowed, and you learn this puppetry, it's that thing we were talking about earlier where you find yourself either doing hand gestures as you're making expressions or trying not to do hand gestures because you're in a moment where it requires stoicness in real life. Because the puppetry is so intuitive on that level in a way that a lot of other creations lack. And there's the fact that when you buy into the Shiva Squad, you pay Pikapedi his $5 on Patreon, you get access to all of the assets for the Shiba that you can customize yourself.
You can also find other people to make an avatar or tweak design stuff.
We're in fact in a room with an avatar customizer as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Cusco.
Yes.
And the amount of creativity that's just so unique. Like, you know, like I said, anyone who's listening to this, don't go in with the stigma as like, you furry or Shiba. I've seen the memes on that. Just go in, communicate with people like normal human beings, and you know, you'll meet some really cool, down to earth normal people. You know.
At the risk of being called out on phrasing, I would almost just call it an attractive template for customization and personalization.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
Where you can look unique. There's literally Shibas that have been made into cats. There's one that has been made into a snake, which is Cusco.
Hi.
He's actually covered in scales, has slitted eyes, and is just kind of a unique creation. Sidejack is a raccoon. And it's just because it is kind of like this. Really, what I compare it to is it's less a furry and it's more like a Saturday morning cartoon dog.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I would pretty much describe it too, since I am one of the many people who do make these custom Shiba recolors for people, is you can literally have any imagination with them. Like, people will come up to you and be like, hey, are you able to do this? Like, I've had people come up to me and like I asked for the reference sheet and or like an idea that they have of like something that they want to like put on the Shiba avatar themselves, and like, you know, it'll be like so extravagant, like it'll be like a dragon or it'll be like a ferret or like any weird like unusual combination of like animal that you can base it off of like a single avatar like template. Like, it's like endless of what people want. And every single time that I've done one, like they're just in awe that I'm able to even like bring it to them like that. And like I've gone nothing but like great compliments on them. Like people talk about them more, and then they just want to continue it. Like they come up with these other ideas and then it just keeps going.
I think one of the most unique ones that I've seen is like a Shiba that's that bubble tea.
Oh yeah, bubble tea one, and then like even have one that there's even one that's in the Shiba community that I've noticed he's literally just an outline design, and it's just a background with like a rainbow like shader on it that just changes color every once in a while.
Like synthwave.
Yeah, it's like a synthwave.
It does lend itself to a kind of abstraction like that, where it's not. It like that's what I meant when I said it's an attractive template. It's just kind of something on which to express yourself.
One thing I gotta say though, Cusco, you were a console gamer. You weren't really big on PC stuff. You came into the PC thing. You got into VR chat. Then you started looking up the customization on the Shiba stuff, and now you're making Shibas. You never did that in your life before.
Absolutely not.
Program and stuff, and you found out you had a natural talent for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just like it was something that just like became second nature. because it's like after a while, like, well, so the first thing that happens whenever you get the assets for the Shiba avatar from Pikapedi's Patreon is it comes with a Google tutorial, just a very brief one, just like on the basics of using a program called Substance Painter. And basically he teaches you and like tells you like a little bit in depth on like the situation that you're being presented with, like everything whenever you go into Substance Painter, like all the layers and all the folders are all laid out for you. They're all named and everything, and you basically just kind of work with it. And then from there, you can add on to it whether you want to change something or you want to, you want to adjust something. You can do that. It's super easy, and like for me, coming from someone who's literally, who's just been kind of mainly console. Like a console player way before I even decided to get like an actual gaming PC. I didn't know much about it, but I did know like mainly like Photoshop and Adobe products, but like never like avatar editing software. I didn't know any of that. But like whenever I actually like decided I wanted to pick it up and play with it, it was kind of like, oh, okay, this is actually really easy. And like it grew to something where like I gradually started getting better, and like it just kept growing.
So overall, this is definitely more than Shiba's.
Yeah.
So
Right.
final thoughts on VR.
And remember, the whole Shiba Squad thing is only one of many, many communities. But I mean, like I said, don't be afraid to meet these communities because they're all unique and cool in their own way.
So final thoughts on VR?
It's an innovation I should have given more credit to at the time that it was coming out. I had no idea where it was going or what it would come to represent to me. And it definitely represents a greater social platform than simply shooting the bad guys in 3D.
No, go on.
VR, man, it changed my life. It changed the lives of many people. I think you should give it a shot. I think the games are only going to get better. The social platform VR chat we're talking about, there's a few others, but this is like the most popular. It's very unique. And once you get in and meet, a few good people, and then they help introduce other people, I mean, you'll have like so many just amazing adventures, and it'll probably inspire you to meet them in real life. You might even, if you're single, you might even find someone and fall in love. Or, I mean, the possibilities with VR is limitless, and the technology is always getting better. And if you don't want to spend buku bucks, they have cheap headsets available now. Though keep in mind, these cheaper headsets, like the mixed reality ones, don't represent some of the the better features of the newer ones. You can also check out secondhand, but just don't be afraid to dip in, check out some of the games and stuff. Check out VR chat. Don't be afraid to talk to people. Like I said, leave your stereotypes and stigmas at the door. I think VR chat is some of the, I guess you could say some of the worst if you meet them trolls, but mainly some of the best of human interactivity I've seen, best of humanity. And yeah, so Cusco Sidejack, which one do you want to go next?
Well, for me, for VR itself, it's mainly been a thing where it's kind of been like one of those things where I've gradually opened myself up more to, because like Slaya said, it's definitely showed more human like interactivity than I've ever imagined from like a social like gaming network that I've ever experienced before. For me personally, just to throw this out, like I was in a situation where, growing up, I didn't have that many best friends or really any friends really. And like I only like recently like stopped hanging out with this one friend of mine because he was like my only friend that I really had for for the majority longest time in any like friend relationship that I've ever had. And that was just from like sophomore year of high school uh to last year. And that was the longest I've ever had a friendship with. But like whenever I went into VR and like I went into VR chat, like I started hanging out with more and more people, and people kept recognizing me as their friend, and it was just like a whole other ball game to where it was just like, you know, people actually like, you know, they see me as their friend and I see them as my friend, and it's just it grows and grows. And um like it's even surreal to think like back like way back early into this recording, Slaya mentioned that, you know, he's going to be meeting a group of people, like a bunch of people that he met on VR, and I'm actually one of them, in I believe February. But I mean, I'm just like one of like 20 something people that are just going to be in this giant group that we've all met each other on VR chat. And it's just crazy to think that, because I never in my whole life of playing video games or even being on this kind of system would even imagine that. And it's made my life a lot better because I've opened myself up more because of it. And I mean, it's only getting better for me. So I mean, if anyone's been in a situation where, you know, they've either just had to deal with being like bullied their life, or they've gone through any like depression issues or anything like that. But I mean, I'm not just necessarily saying that VR chat's mainly for those people. It can be for anyone really, because every type of person can be on there. It's not mainly just one group of people. I mean, so if you do end up going on there, don't be surprised if you see like multiple different people on there like thinking different things, because you're going to have those people who are just going to go on there and they're just going to go on there for shits and giggles, whatever like that, because it's just a video game to them. But then you're going to also have the people who, you know, they go on there like as like a social network in a way, like to actually hang out with friends that they've met over the time that they've played it. And, you know, it's actually like, it's an exciting experience. So I would definitely recommend it to people. Plus it's free. So, I mean, free's the best kind of thing.
July?
Well, I would just say you got to try it. You got to get out, and if you can't afford it or you're on the fence about whether you should buy it or not, like the whole VR setup, try to find. I know there's places and malls that might offer like a 5 or 10 minute experience, or find a friend that has it and just try it out. Don't don't be afraid to just try it because it's different. I think all the videos you see of people in VR, like on YouTube or anything, it doesn't do the experience justice as far as trying to get a feel of what it's like. And I'm not even talking about the social aspects. I mean, even the technical aspects. Like, I know a lot of the videos, they just look jittery, but it's not like that when you actually have the headset on. It's not how it is. It just feels natural, like you're actually in a different world. But I would just say try it. It's changed people. I mean, I don't want us to keep saying the same thing, but it was definitely an eye opener for me. It showed me that I needed like the human connection more than I thought I did.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so that is the state of VR.
You can try VR chat in desktop mode to get a taste of it, but it's not even close to being in VR.
Well, so overall, it looks like VR has definitely come a long way. It's taken basically, I think, a decade to finally perfect all the technology to make it viable. You had to start with the motion controls, which the Wii kind of pioneered and made fairly common. You had to have 3D, which started, I think, getting popular around 2012, 2013. And finally, all of that is culminated into this. For me, the gaming aspect isn't that compelling because I intend to try it and see, but it doesn't seem that compelling. But it's the human interaction aspect that seems the most interesting because, there's a lot of us who aren't really extroverts, who don't really like getting into social situations. And I think this is a good gateway to becoming more social because, as much as I hate to admit it, no man is an island, or woman, whichever the case may be. Gotta be social justice, right? But no one is an island. There we go. We'll be Star Trek about it. No one is an island, and I think for the people out there who are, well, kind of lonely, this might provide that option to finally have some friends, For me, I've mentioned this on this channel on many occasions that I didn't have any friends till 2010. And even then, that was completely by chance more than anything else. So, I definitely recommend trying out VR. I mean, as was stated earlier, there are some cheap options. There's still like really cheap Chinese headsets, and give it a try, see if you like it.
Also, used market as well.
Well, I was going to say before we close this out, do always Google VR arcade near you because my first experience with True VR was an hour for about $35, and if that seems steep, it did seem like an eternity of shooting zombies, and it did give me a very good taste of what I was in for.
All right, so I am GeneralLotz, and I'm going to wish you good. VR, whatever, makes you happy.